Oh, see, when I don't have an intro video, my dancing to the countdown music just comes straight out to y'all. How is everybody doing? Did you miss me? I've been off the air now for about an hour and 10 minutes because we are doing question time on a day when I was also doing Hangouts and headlines. And I'm actually going to apologize to the awesome supporters we have at Utreon and Patreon that have this question time stream, that support us, that we do questions for. If this is your first visit to Question Time, which is the monthly show we do specifically for those supporters, that highlights the questions that they want to make sure they get answered, but that we also do community questions on as part of the second half of this video. I want to apologize because I got the Question Time solicitation post up on Utreon and Patreon yesterday. I put it up yesterday after the Bitcast, so ultimately they had less than 24 hours to put together questions, and I feel really guilty about that. So if you are a Patreon or Utreon supporter, you want to flag that for me in the chat today. I'm going to take it on faith. This is a good Samaritan scenario. No lies. Be honest. Please do flag that because I know I didn't give quite enough time. That said, we already have, I think, 3 or 4 questions that people did get up in that limited window, and I really appreciate that we're going to talk about. So without further ado, let's just mention the fact that this is a show that is made possible by supporters, viewers, listeners like you. Whether you're a YouTube member, a Utreon supporter, Patreon supporter, all of that goes in to making any of this work. Keeping the lights on here at home, feeding co-counsel and the kids, the littlest hodlings, and not making me feel like an absolute moron for doing this instead of going out to cocktail parties and trying to develop business specifically for the practice of law. You all make this possible, and I am so thankful for all of that and for you visiting us here in Question Time right now. So the structure of this is that we will be covering the questions from the patrons, the Utreon members, the supporters. Otherwise, they'll get fancy YouTube slides that I do for the virtual legality episodes. And then when we get done with that, we will take community questions, which I would ask that you flag either with the word question or with the super chat. I always see those. That's not required, but I do see those a little bit easier through the StreamYard interface if you really want to make sure that I see that question. Otherwise, just talking with all of us. It's a little bit of a special kind of hangouts with no headlines that we do in Question Time, and having a great Halloween morning here with you all. So let's talk about the first question. Now that Musk owns Twitter, that's Elon Musk, not the smell of a moose or something, in the event he does discover evidence that the bot counts at Twitter were, in fact, understated by the previous board/executives and decides to dime them out to appropriate regulators. Hey, SEC, I got some news for you. Who would actually be on the hook, potentially? The person that signed the filing, the entire board that was in at the time the filing was made? So this is going to be an SEC kind of question. The basics around this, if you haven't been following the Elon Musk Twitter saga, is that as part of trying to back out of the deal, which is now consummated, so he didn't back out terribly well. I guess we know that about Elon. We'll leave that for another time. You see that Elon accused Twitter of undercounting its bots, undercounting its false accounts, so that people, advertisers particularly, would see that and say, oh, it's a very robust platform, and this is great. And you've already seen Elon Musk tweet out now some of the communications he's been able to find as the sole owner of the company. And let's say he did have just the smoking gun, the silver bullet, however other metaphors you want to mention for finding this particular information. And he says, SEC, I got him. Then a couple of things would happen. Yes, absolutely. The individual that signs that document is going to be investigated. And the big tricky part for them there is that if they get a finding against them in a particular way, and then there's a lot of facts and circumstances that go along with this, we might have to call in an SEC regulator or somebody that specializes in that type of litigation, that if you get the black mark from the SEC as effectively untrustworthy, a bad actor, then that causes a whole lot of problems for your future. Because one of the things that happens with a bad actor designation is that you can't be involved in a company that's seeking to raise money in certain ways, particularly private offerings. So there's a representation and warranty that goes at the bottom of basically every kind of funding document now. And it says no bad actors. It says you have not been designated as a person of interest, somebody that is bad in the eyes of the SEC, because if you have, then we've got problems using this exemption to the registration of your stock offering. And that is a very, very bad thing. So the person that signed it definitely people in charge of the company that would have had approval rights, somebody like the SEC subcommittee of a board that would otherwise be going through this and trying to make sure that it was accurate, they might be on the hook. The really weird thing about all this, I'm just going to be frank here, and the weird thing about the tweets that we see today, for instance, is that Elon Musk now owns Twitter. So while it might be emotionally cathartic or psychologically helpful for Elon Musk, it is not a great strategy for maximizing financial returns to go and find the skeletons and then immediately expose them because you now own the house, right? And that's going to be an interesting kind of situation for Elon Musk. He just spent $40+ billion on this company. And if he finds communications that are problematic, they aren't just going to hit the person that signed it. They're going to hit the company that he owns. They're going to hit him. Remember, he was just about to do that. He was intimating that it would be problematic, right? His main avenue of trying to get out of the deal was if this were revealed to the SEC to be true, that you were massively undercounting bots and that investors didn't get the right information, etc., then that would be a materially adverse event because that's legalese for bad thing. And the SEC would have penalties to impose upon the company, including potentially fraud type claims for fraud on the market, lying to investors. And if Elon Musk has proof of that, yeah, the SEC might act on it, but they might act on it against Twitter as an entity. Twitter survives. It just changed ownership. It's just under new management. And so if they attack Twitter and they hurt the value of the asset Elon just bought, you might have all sorts of trouble, not just with the SEC, also with potentially the merger agreement. We might still wind up in litigation over that and the promises that were made about that. All sorts of things could happen. Other aspects of this deal are already weird. The news that came out, the rumors that came out over the weekend is that Elon Musk fired the senior staff for cause. He claimed that there was a reason under their contracts that they were in breach to get out of paying additional severance or golden parachutes or what have you. That's a tricky thing to argue in this particular scenario. I don't know what it's based on. I don't know specifically what their contracts say. If that continues to come out, that's odd. You're dealing with a wild card, and you're dealing with a wild card that may not seek to maximize his own position on this particular deal. And in all likelihood, if I do a virtual legality today after 2 streams this morning, it would be on Elon Musk acting a little wild over the past 72 hours, including potentially seeking to have verification status be a paid feature and all these other things at Twitter. So I'm at least somewhat likely to do a video on Elon Musk and Twitter. So this is a great question. But the answer is the SEC has some pretty broad authority to go after whoever is responsible for what would be a fraudulently certified filing. So that can be the company on the whole. That can be the subcommittee. It could be the board. It probably isn't if they kind of isolated it correctly. It's definitely the person that signed. That person is definitely on the hook. And going from there, if there's other lies, if there's problems in the actual policies and procedures at the company level for even making sure some of this information is correct, the sky's the limit when you're dealing with a regulator. And Elon Musk knows this. He's dealt with the SEC seemingly every day of his life, and he is not a fan. But thank you for the question. The answer is, yeah, there's a number of parties that could be on the hook, including the company itself that he now owns. So Elon Musk, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for the question and your support of the channel. I can't do it without you. Next question. What would be required to entice people to use other video on demand services aside from or in addition to YouTube? Obviously, you're watching this on YouTube. We use YouTube as our primary. Despite all the problems with Google and all the alternatives available, Dailymotion, Nico, Odyssey, Rumble, VO, Vidly, it comes across that people shun the idea of even trying another site, that everything needs to be on YouTube. If it's a centralization issue, RSS feeds exist, and there are aggregators like the Vertex.io. I think this is an interesting question. So I can tell you my own history. I can't speak for everybody, obviously. I was a lawyer. Am a lawyer? Who knows on a daily basis what I'm doing with my time. But I was a lawyer that was looking to potentially get out there and maybe a little bit market the company, learn a little bit more about YouTube in particular, because that's what my clients were dealing with. And I wanted to see exactly what analytics they were getting and kind of react to that a little bit. And to be frank, you see this in like the Epic versus Apple lawsuit, but YouTube is where the people are, right? And if you're trying to get a message out, if you're trying to get noticed, if you're trying to do marketing or make money specifically through this platform, whatever it is, you want to go where the people are, like Ariel. You always think about the Little Mermaid when you're setting your business goals. That's how I think about it, at least. And so we went to YouTube first because it was the one that I knew. I learned those buttons first because it was the one that I knew. And then a year ago, or maybe a little bit more at this point. They strike a video that's a year old, and I go, this is interesting that they would be so arbitrary on these kinds of things. And that's when I start to say, all right, we're going to need some other options. Utreon, for instance, the one that people always ask me about, right? Utreon is an upstart type company that I had talked to a bunch during the COPA issue with respect to YouTube, and I wanted to support them. They wanted to support me, and Patreon was raising its rates and doing various things with its terms of service. And I said, all right, let's talk about that. So you see Utreon at the top. I've talked to people. I said, hey, if you want to support the channel through Utreon, we get more of that money, right? All of these platforms take a cut, but Utreon takes a very small cut because we're trying to support each other and each other's growth. And so I'm constantly doing that. And Utreon mirrors all the videos that I do on YouTube. So you can go and watch me on Utreon if you want. That's not their primary thing right now. They're mostly competing with Patreon and creator support platforms than they are as a video service, but they are mirrored there. And then when you talk about alternatives, the ones that I have looked into, and Rumble sends me an email every day or so asking me to mirror the stuff on Rumble, the ones that I have looked into, I don't necessarily love the buttons. And here's the thing in terms of me. Just in terms of resource management, you say it's a centralization issue. It's a knowledge-based issue, and it's a time-based issue. So one of the reasons Hangouts and Headlines is 7:30 in the morning is so that I can generally make start of day or close to start of day business calls with prospective clients, current clients, things that I'm doing with the firm. And I need to be able to go farm to table with my videos very, very, very quickly to get them out at all. Now, fortunately, I've been able to do that. I find time, a half hour here, 45 minutes there to organize a video, and then I find the time to tape the video, and I find the time to edit it if it needs to, and upload it, and all these various things throughout my day. But actually adding buttons to that, changing over to multiple services or things that require me to pay attention are a problem. And you say, okay, you can have things RSS feeded, or you can have things sent directly. That's a certain level of trust that you have to have. With the platform, with the service, with they're not going to just cut off whatever it is here. YouTube, this channel now has become, a monetary asset to go with the firm, thanks to people like you. And so you have to watch exactly where you're putting things, whether that's going to affect it positively or negatively. And I might wind up on Rumble as well. It would be mirrored. YouTube would still be my primary because there are aspects of YouTube that I think are good, right? One, obviously, they are not just a video vendor. They are also a advertising vendor. And so they have the cleanest, easiest way to make sure that if you do get a good and popular supported channel, that hopefully, not too distractingly, they can put ads in there and you can make that make sense for your business proposition. When at bare minimum, that requires learning a lot of other buttons and other things for other services. So I think what it would take, the question at the start is what would be required. It would be ease of use and trust. And so I sit here observing those and how they operate, and I'm not quite there yet. Not that I trust YouTube, mind you. I have a number of videos on this channel that say they're too arbitrary. They're too mercurial. People call me out for using that word, but it's the truth. That's what I think about them. That's why it pops out so much. And I will continue to observe those things. I also think there are risks of effectively echo chambers developing between YouTube and Rumble and Odyssey or whoever. And, reasonable minds can differ is still my ethos. It is still my primary message from any of this, which is that politics is very passionate and people are very, very concerned about a lot of things that happen in the world. I'm never going to tell them not to be, but that we can have better conversations if we aren't just attacking each other's humanity and we aren't just calling each other names and we aren't just acting in a way that I find to be very discomforting on the nature of human growth and conversation. And that might sound haughty-taughty. It sounds it to me in my head. But I don't want to be in situations where I'm supporting platforms, places, or people that do those attacks that otherwise negate the human experience or humanity on the whole. So I want to be cautious with that. And that means that as a lawyer, as a corporate lawyer, and a person that's risk averse and takes those cautions and acts on them, I move very slowly on these kinds of things. Right now, we're working through a transition on our podcast service that we're focused on. And then I focus on that. And when I'm happy with that, which I'm not yet, we'll move on to the evaluating the next thing. So it's a slow process. We're not yet at the 4th anniversary of Virtual Legality or this channel. We'll continue to evaluate it. But really, to me, it's ease of use. It can't be more time consuming. And it has to be valuable in some fashion. And I don't know that I've seen that just yet. Thank you so much for the question. If you have more to add on that and convincing me on the value of one or more of these propositions, leave a comment. Absolutely. I'm so appreciative of your support for what we're doing here and the conversations that we have. But I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer first and a social media video content person second. And I'm constantly learning every single day about that second job. And that's fun. I like that. But it does mean that I'm perhaps not the most efficient. I don't have Emily D. Baker's team. I don't have Rob's verve for just buying expensive camera equipment and building jury boxes and whatnot. So as I sit here, it's still kind of me with bubble gum and baling wire putting together this channel and hopefully making it a little bit more professional every day. Thank you so much for the question. Question number 3. Have you ever watched other sci-fi shows like Andromeda, Farscape, Lex, Sliders, or Stargate? I will answer this very quickly. Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I can't remember what episode it was on when I was talking about this. Maybe some of you in the chat can. But I absolutely adore Farscape. And Farscape was one of, if not the only time when I participated in kind of a fan movement to save a show after season 4 of Farscape ended as it did. And I still have my Farscape, the Peacekeeper Wars sweatshirt from all of that time. And it mostly wears. I think it's got holes in it, but that's one of my favorite shows ever. Andromeda is kind of a goofy Hercules in space show, which I enjoyed. I didn't watch Lex. Sliders I did watch, and Stargate I have like a complete series copy of, and I've only ever watched like the first season. So I think I have to get into that a little bit more. But honestly, time is the constraint, not resources or availability at this point. And I haven't watched much. Or have I tried equivalents from elsewhere, such as Legend of Galactic Heroes, Macross, Space Pirate Captain Harlock, The Irresponsible Captain Tyler, or Van Dread? Of those, I've seen Captain Harlock, and I've played a Captain Harlock video game, but the one that I love the most is Macross. So I do have Macross. I've enjoyed the Macross movies. I love the notions of kind of intergalactic war that they put into that particular show. So I have seen that. It seems like internet personalities only ever refer to Star Trek or Star Wars. They're the big ones. They're the really big ones. Star Wars was the most formative for me, but Star Trek was the one that was the most intellectually stimulating. I've talked about Measure of a Man, for instance, is one of my favorite pieces of media ever, which is an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Farscape, I absolutely adore for how serialized it was early, right? Farscape, and the one that is here that I love that I don't see is Babylon 5. Those kinds of long-form story is with the notion of politics and interpersonal communications and interpersonal interactions were so big for me. When Star Trek was great intellectually, but basically everybody's perfect, and Star Wars was on a long-term hiatus when I was in my youth. And so I loved Star Wars. I read the Star Wars books, but they weren't really making mass media until I was out of high school. And so that one really didn't hit me as hard. Macross, I loved, but I felt like it was sliced up even when I was watching it originally. I now have like the digital copies of that. And so, yes, if I talk about Star Trek and Star Wars the most, it's because they were the most influential, but I have definitely watched a whole lot of science fiction and liked much of it. So thank you so much for the question. And I will try to talk about Farscape more because it deserves to be talked about. It's Muppets in space. It is both hilarious and dramatic. It is wonderful. Farscape, you guys should check it out. Final question from the Utreon and Patreon supporters. I love this one. I am also a happy and optimistic person. I certainly try to be, like you. I don't find these traits are ideal when needing to be taken seriously in times of conflict. Any tips on how to handle serious situations where gravitas is necessary? First of all, I love gravitas as a word. Thanks. So I think I've told this story in this space before, but it's always worth telling. I was pulled into a, could you close the door behind you type meeting at Big Law pretty early on in my career. And the conversation topic was, I smile and laugh too much, that our clients need to know that we're taking their problems seriously. And I was essentially too glib. And people were walking by the office and seeing me smile, and I needed to be much, much more stern. And I said, well, look, this is work. I'm here however much. I'm 11 hours a day. I'm not going to go and be sullen and serious for those large portions of time. And so I'm going to be jovial around the office. I'm going to talk to all the assistants. I'm going to do what I do. I chat with the receptionist. This is me at Big Law. And if a client is there that you're concerned about, let me know, and I'll be very serious at my desk, very serious, while I type and do whatnot. But like that wasn't going to change. And this is me very young. And this is part of what gained me my reputation at Big Law as a squeaky wheel that doesn't follow orders very well, or that isn't a team player, depending on which review you're looking at. And so that absolutely happened to me. Now, I will say this. I personally think you can use optimism and a generalized recognition of humanity of both opposing counsel and the opposing company. Now, I'm not in litigation, right? I'm in business deals, but there's still oppositional forces there. You can use that as a highlight to when you really mean business. And what I mean by that is, right, this is a family-friendly space. We don't swear here, generally, right? But if you hear me escalate a swear even a little bit to even primetime TV, people generally, say, here's a tip for the swear jar. Or, oh my God, what did Hoeg say? That kind of thing. And that's what I mean by highlight, right? So if you're known as the happy guy, if you're known as the optimistic guy, if you're known out there being the one that's jovial, loves life, and is wanting to do this job because they want whatever it is. If you're a lawyer, better access to justice, better, more meaningful deals that don't otherwise kill companies in the crib with lawyers' fees and things like that. Well, then you can go forward and you can say, okay, if we're at a negotiation and now I put my hand on the desk and now I say, you can't possibly be serious. Or as my wife likes, because I think she heard me say this on a phone call once, do your damn job. Then you're going to take it more seriously than the guy that's just a sailor and swearing every phone call and is just, otherwise trying to operate a good old boys network through their legal services. If you do that, then I think you can use that optimism and that happiness for your benefit. So yeah, serious situations often demand serious responses, but you can still start out with honey. You can still start out with the carrot before the stick. And then if the honey gets taken away, if the stick comes out, you can lean into that entirely, right? Because I'm a happy person and you've made me mad. So what does that mean for you, for your client, for the deal that you've proposed? You emphasize that 100%. And co-counsel is correcting me already. Says the phrase was, it's your job. There was no cursing, but it was intense. All right. I didn't escalate it that far. That was the next notch up. I couldn't remember the story entirely. Maybe I should have you come on the show. But she did. She said, oh my goodness, I've never heard you do that. And that's the key, right? You don't have to use it a lot. If you have that in your quiver, you use it, people remember it. And very often they do their job. And so, yeah, I've talked about my techniques in negotiations a lot. I like to start with honey. I like to start with, hey, let's all be friends. Let's get this deal done. Let's make it work for everybody. But yeah, if you escalate, I will escalate in return, and you won't be happy that I did. And I think you can use that. And I think you've heard that voice a little bit sometimes in like Lawyers and Dragons. But you can use that. You have to always have it with. And what's really funny about that is I'll give you another story before we head on to community questions. And it's my other boss, my good boss, the boss that loved me, does take me aside. I think I'm a third-year associate, and say, and this was, I think, actually after I had demonstrated what I just talked about. Said, I was worried about you. I said, oh, really? What were you worried about? He said, well, I was worried about whether or not you could take a negotiation and do what needed to be done, because you are, you're trying to be friends with everybody. I said, well, I think that's a good place to start. And he said, yeah, I understand. And then by the time I'm an 8th year, I'm a partner at the firm. And I still remember this same boss. I mean, I'm leading the negotiations. He's senior at that point. And I'm just drilling into the opposing side. Like I'm just crushing them on some points. And the opposing side starts to cry. And this is a business deal. And I'm like, I'm taking it back. He mutes the phone and he puts his hand on my leg and he says, okay, you need to back off. And I was like, okay, we'll back it off. We'll back it off. But it is so funny because I like to remind him of that story, even when we get together now, as he's doing his own thing, and say, you remember the time when you thought like, oh, I'm too happy, I might not have the spine for this. And then like a relatively short time later, you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, I have to turn them off. Yeah, you can use it. You can use it. Don't change who you are. Don't change who you are for any job. It is not worth it. But try to lean into the strengths that you have. Try to lean away from the weaknesses that you have, and use that for conversation. That's my answer to that. And yes, I see in the chat, I definitely did. I definitely have had opposing sides cry. And I always, when it's a business deal, right? This is millions of dollars we're talking about, generally speaking. I'm always like, what in the world? And part of my weaknesses, right? We'll just talk about it openly. Part of my weaknesses on this kind of thing is recognizing the emotionality that goes into just a business sale, an acquisition, something along those lines. That there are actually people that react very emotionally to what I view as, okay, these are the parameters. This is what the transition services agreement is going to look like. Here's how the earnout is going to be structured. And if you don't deliver that money, you're not getting paid. And like setting it up so that the incentives of everybody align, etc. And I have definitely made people cry on the other end of the phone. And that's not, I don't like that. That's not my goal. That's not, we talk about it as messaging and virtual legality, right? Always think about what is your aim. My aim is to get them to agree to these deal points that I think are important. It is not to make you cry. I don't think you need to cry. I'm not trying to, but it does happen. And that's the value of mentorship either way, is that I was absolutely winning. And we won every point that I argued on that particular deal. I was absolutely winning, but you still have to have at least some emotional IQ to be like, okay, we're asking a lot from them, or a lot more than they thought that would be asked of them. Let them reflect on it. Let them come back. We can still be stern and have that kind of conversation. And I've learned every day of my career. That's why they call it practice, right? It's practice of law. And that's what makes it fun as a job. It's also what makes it terrifying, is you very often realize that what you don't know. You hear me say, I know enough to be dangerous on some of these things. Maybe I should make that a shirt. But it's the truth. You know enough to know what you don't know, which means that almost every task that is remotely new, and everything is new in law every time, means you look at it and you're talking to a client. You're like, how am I going to do this in the back of your head? And then you figure it out. You negotiate that document, you get to the next one. But it's always that every day. And so absolutely. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for the question. That's what I would recommend. Don't change yourself, but you do have to be ready to straighten the spine a little bit and go after some people sometimes in a serious situation where you need that gravitas. All right, folks, it's time for community questions. We're about halfway through. We'll probably do about a half hour of these. Like I said, mention question, put it in a super chat if you want to make darn sure that I see it, but that is not necessary. We'll just be selecting essentially randomly as I go through. I see Rob is here in the chat from Law and Lumber. Hey, Rob, how you doing? And we'll talk. I also see David, who continues to ask this question. What is the function of a rubber duck? David, I told you this. It's companionship. Companionship, especially for scary situations like baths. You need that companion. I'm going to get you a rubber duck. I feel like you need a rubber duck companion, David. We'll see. Maybe we'll put one in the store. It'll be a little rubber duck brains or something. Okay, we'll highlight my colleagues here. Rob, question, why am I watching this and asking questions rather than listening to updates on trust and estate law? Tax updates fun. Oh, it sounds like Rob has to deal with a continuing legal education class. Move to Michigan, Rob. We don't have CLEs here. Now, I think every day is basically a CLE for me doing these topics and researching things. So it doesn't quite get you out of the process. I love learning, but Michigan doesn't have CLE requirements. So I'm very sorry for your Virginia practice, my man. All right, current presenter is from the law firm of Yates, Campbell, and Hoeg, assuming no relation. That is not me. That is not us. That is not my Hoegs. So there you go. There's one and only Hoeg Law itself, and it doesn't have any partners. We did for a little bit. No longer. Just remember to soap up your rubber ducky good and long before you use it for companionship. Absolutely. You need a clean rubber duck. No question. I have rubber ducks in my water feature in the garden, says Secret McSquirrel. Hey, that's cool. A rubber duck brains. I don't know. David wouldn't like it. He can't see what the reasoning behind a rubber duck is. So folks, do remember, if you want to get a question out here, I'm kind of at the current time, the 10:30 chats. I'll be going backwards. But do hit me with question : or something that makes me see it. That would be very, very helpful on this process. Sarnism's question: who is your main party in FF6? It's a good question. So I will tell you, Celeste is always my favorite character in FF6. So she's always in the main. I would say probably Gao. I really loved Shadow. And probably throw Terra in there. Probably. It's probably my main party, although I rotate a lot. One of the things I did with Final Fantasy VI is try to break their systems, try to get everybody Ultima and be able to cast it for one magic point. We're getting a little inside baseball here, but I like that cast almost entirely, everybody in it. So I don't know that I have specifically a main. Matthias says you need to consider the future relationship you may or may not have. Burning all your bridges to win in one separate issue is seldom a good idea. Absolutely. Yes, and that's a very good point for dealing with business transactions, right? I've had that conversation even with my own client who wants me to kill somebody. I say, well, look, you're getting into business with these folks. This is a strategic relationship. You're not selling out. You're not leaving the country on this. You're going to work together the day after we hang up and the lawyers are no longer on the phone. So what does that look like? How important is this? Having that conversation from a practical level is often the best advice I can give. But we are zealous advocates for our clients. And if they want these 6 things, we're going to make the best argument we can. And we go through that as well. Possum says, I do the same thing with promises. I won't promise. I'll say I'll do something. I'll do it. Otherwise, if I ever do promise, it will be worthless. Yeah, you want to make sure that it's very specific to what it is that you want to do. You've got these different levels of commitment, right? So if you don't want to be the guy in Jerry Maguire that says my word is stronger than oak, and then immediately goes to a different agent. This is what I think about is my broken promise standard. This movie's all in there, folks. This movie's all in there. That's Sarah. When you make Hoeg Law so mad that the harsh turn and cursey words come out, you done it now. That's the idea, right? The idea is, okay, I'm an affable care bearer of a lawyer, or people think of me as, whatever, Columbo or Matlock, and it's just go, oh, I don't really understand this term. Can you explain it to me? Because it seems really evil, and have that kind of technique. And then if I escalate, that can often be useful. End of the day, though, business transaction negotiations are a little bit tough because they're not the lawyers that are the ones doing the fighting that ultimately get to decide at the end. It's the clients. And so sometimes we can have them dead to rights and the client just wants to capitulate. And that's always an interesting aspect of the lawyer-client relationship, because I can get really frustrated. I was like, we got him. We got what you want. We got what you need. And you back off. And it's like, okay, all right, well, then we'll do that. We'll do that then. Ho, go and do your damn job. And I immediately straighten my back. Spooky. Yeah, I mean, you got to have that voice. Corporate negotiations, you have to be able to advocate for your client strongly, or you're not doing your job. Babylon 5 is the original. They got the script, said no to it, and made DS9. Babylon 5 is better. I like both, but Babylon 5 is first, definitely. That's kind of what I think helped get Deep Space Nine made by Star Trek. Let's see here, what else? Loved Sliders before they switched out a lot of the original characters and tried to make the show more sexy. Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly how that went. I recall the same kind of thing, which is that I didn't like the back half of Sliders, and I can't fully remember why. So I'm going to take your word for it, Carrie, that's what they did. It certainly sounds like what networks do. I love Farscape, says AK. That is a very good position to have. Tia says, I loved Sliders back in the day. We need a rewatching of Firefly. That's easy. It's so short. That's one of those a little bit like Farscape. They got a movie to kind of finish off their plot lines as well. Yes, Farscape was so great. Which version of Stargate? I have the box set of like the original, the one that just says Stargate, like not the movie, but the TV series. I also have a copy of the movie. I don't have Atlantis, if that's the question. A lot of people love Farscape. I love all these comments. Farscape is great. Woohoo, Farscape. This is you're my people. Farscape is awesome. Jess says you don't have CLEs in Michigan. What? I didn't think that was possible. Law, I learned something new. We do not have CLE requirements. Yeah, we have a generalized ethical requirement to stay abreast of legal evolutions in our field of practice, give or take. But we don't have classes that we have to go to. And Rob could probably speak to this. The methodology there is somewhat questionable, right? Forcing people to take classes is maybe not the best way to make sure that they're conveying information. However, a lot of bar associations and licensing bodies want to make sure that they look like they're doing something. And Michigan just doesn't have that specific requirement for CLEs. Strive says, I don't mind Enterprise, the Star Trek show, as well, but most people wanted to see technology move forward when it's a tech sci-fi. Yeah, I don't like Enterprise so much because I think the plot lines just got a bit dumber, and I really love the intellectual plot lines of Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Next Generation. A little bit less so with Voyager, but I do love Scott Bakula. He's wonderful. I love Quantum Leap, but I didn't love Enterprise that much. Question from Stephanie: how long did it take you to find your niche and your audience on YouTube? Well, I think I'm still finding them. Right. I will say that the niche, the focus, business and law, video games, technology, software, that kind of thing, that was from day one. Right. You can go to Virtual Legality episode 1. That's Fallout 76. Can you get refunds? It's reading terms of service, doing what I do. And the notion behind the channel was, let's talk about important stuff, evaluating contracts, how we read them, what rights are, what obligations are, and put it in a space that you're already interested in reading stuff. Put it in a space that I'm already reading, gaming, for instance, or pop culture. We talk a lot about the MCU and Sony and Netflix and whatnot. Things that I'm already interested in, and engage with people on important topics like that with the pop culture kind of reference point. And I got this a little bit from working with Easy Allies and doing Help Us Out Hoeg. I got this a little bit from looking at the YouTube kind of film critique scene where they were talking about kind of serious philosophical questions through stupid stuff like evaluating, Last Jedi scenes. And I was like, we can do that. We can pull that off. And then, I was sponsoring Easy Allies at the time. So we kind of started out with a little starter pack of like 500 subscribers. And then Virtual Legality has been kind of a slow growth kind of thing the whole time. So I think I can probably still pull up my dates here, but I can talk about the fact that I keep like a little timeline of the growth of the channel because it's fun to reflect on how things have gone. And I don't know if I can find it really, really quickly here. But it's what I use when I do my anniversary posts, which is coming up at the end of November, where I say, here's where we were year 0, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. And I just don't see it right now. I apologize. I can't remember what I called it. But it's a document that I have in this folder. Oh, milestone timeline. There we go. Being very, very serious. And in terms of growth, so we start November 27th, 2018, and we don't hit 10,000 subscribers until May of 2020. So that's more than a year later. And I was really stoked about hitting 10,000 subscribers. It's a big deal. But it's pretty slow on that run. And then we go up from there. So we're at, on the second anniversary, we're at, or the first anniversary, we're at 5,800 subscribers. At the second anniversary, we're at 28,000. Then it's 51,000 last year. And then we'll be at, God willing, we'll be at like 110,000 coming up in a month. So you can see it kind of grow from there. But, it's a huge number of videos. It's a very kind of everyday focused channel. It's not like the occasional viral video success. And what I tell people, because a lot of people, especially law firms around my area, ask me, how did you find that success? It's like, you grind. It's been a grind for me. I don't have, with the exception of a couple of those videos, one of which goes to like 300,000 views. I don't have any of those viral monstrosity videos that just grab in a bunch of subscribers. So one of the things I like to say is I think the people that find Virtual Legality, find it slowly, but their core, they stay. We don't have a lot of fall off in that particular subscription base. And when we just keep growing it from there, and it's kind of percentage based. So every kind of month is a little bit stronger than the last. And that's been fun to see. But the idea was what it was from day one. This is the same idea that co-counsel said I wouldn't be able to find an audience for, which she loves. She loves it when I mention that. But it's a great question. And I really do think the thing that you have to do the most is be willing to put it out there all the time and just kind of grow in your presentation. Have your own slant on things. I don't think there's really any other corporate lawyer talking video game law and pop culture law on transactional business side really on the internet so much. And now maybe that limits your audience. Maybe this channel will never be legal, but God willing, share with your friends. And we do different things than Emily D. Baker or Legal Bites or any other place that you might go, which is focused on like trials and things like that. But I have fun with it. That's the key. Every day, it takes a little while sometimes to research a video, but by the time that research is done, it's like, right, let's go talk about it. And that's a really fun thing to do. So thank you for the question, Stephanie. I love it. And thank you for marking it as questions. So I knew it was a question. Jay Jones, questions. Did you see that Netflix decided to put a warning label before The Crown? I did. I saw a BBC article last week and another popped up on my phone just before the stream. Yeah, I saw that they added a disclaimer. So, you know, if you're Dame Judi Dench, you can get some stuff done. I think that's really what happened there, mostly. Sardinism. Hoeg's brain is just movie reference all the way down. And video games. And TV. Question. In Elon Musk's open letter to Twitter advertisers, he states outright that he wants Twitter to be regarded as a digital town square. How does this impact its common carrier Section 230 status? I view it as puffery. He wants it to have the quality of a digital town square. He does not want to be regulated as such. That is distinct, I think, from those. And this is the problem with kind of populist legal understanding. Digital town square doesn't have any meaning, period. And so before you get into a government regulated kind of endeavor, it is still a private organization. It is still Twitter deciding what it wants to do. It's just under new management. And so while I think he wants it to be seen as a place where everybody can go and talk about everything, because who wouldn't? You're trying to advertise billboard space in that square. You don't want the government to come in and view it that way. So it doesn't do anything on its own, him just saying the phrase. But we'll see if that goes anywhere with the Supreme Court, and especially the algorithms. They have a case up where they're going to discuss whether the algorithms affect 230's application. We'll be almost certainly covering that in virtual legality. But his letter to the advertisers, that doesn't change. That doesn't change things. Rob says curse words lose their punch if used too frequently. Same concept as negotiations. Save your powder and use sparingly. Take it from Rob. Rob does negotiations as well. He's dealing with really emotional negotiations. I would be willing to bet there's been crying on phone calls with Rob. And yeah, I agree with him entirely. You get better value for your cursey word buck in a negotiation if they are used sparingly. The supply is low. The demand might be high. Either way, the value is higher. Question. Have you thought about doing legal news for gaming adjacent communities like anime or VTubing? The corporate virtual YouTube space has been fascinating to watch. Honestly, I haven't looked at VTubing, so I couldn't tell you. I have enough to cover right now with the gaming industry going crazy seemingly every day that I usually have about 15 topics I could choose between on a given day. If we wind up in a situation where that slows down, where the consolidation period slows down, and we have more space, yeah, that's the kind of thing I would look at. This space kind of graduated to covering not just like active legal news in the video game space, but also like how corporations talk to you, messaging, because I have experience doing that kind of messaging and PR concepts and crisis communications with the clients that I've worked with. And so we kind of got that into the channel as well. That's provided additional content for us on any given day. If it turns out that there's interesting stuff happening there, we do that too. So we do corporate stuff for like Twitch. We do the corporate stuff for Twitter and Facebook, grabbed onto social media, as well as video games. So I'll keep that in mind. I will keep that in mind. Mrs. Hoeg Law says Sliders is a weird long form story that got away from its main premise. Very true. Hoeg, you really should watch the rest of Stargate. After season 1, it stops taking itself so seriously. What's weird is like season 1, I think it had to have been on like Showtime or Stars or something, because it's just got like random gratuitous nudity in this show that's goofy. And so that's interesting. Rob says being in active practice is its own CLE. If you don't keep up with changes, you fail. Yeah. And I've had conversations with opposing counsel where we talk about deal terms or market standards or things like that. I recently found Farscape on Prime Video, catching up on what I missed while serving in the U.S. Army. I think it is on Prime. Excellent recommendation. Farscape is great. I have CEU requirements for my job, and I end up watching a lot of things I don't need just to get the credit. I rarely use any of the info I get. That's the problem, is that anything that might qualify as CLE credit. And I think I talked to you a little bit about trying to get this channel, Virtual Legalities, up for legal credit, which I was in the process of doing. I was almost complete with, and then that kind of fell apart based on some stuff that we don't need to get into. But I might look at that again. I might evaluate that in the future, because I think there are episodes of Virtual Legality that could easily qualify for CLE credit, that we go over so many statutes and so many annotations and apply it to a common case that is otherwise of interest, that lawyers in general would enjoy that. But got to find the right partner to make that work entirely. Carrie asks the important questions. Does anyone feel like the decor at the Cheesecake Factory looks like a lost world on Stargate? I can honestly say I've never thought that, but I can also honestly say I haven't been to a Cheesecake Factory since I was like really young. Any interest in Battlestar Galactica? Very much so. Love Battlestar Galactica. I assume we're talking about the remake and not the 1970s version. The Ron Moore-led remake is excellent, like right up until the end, where I think it loses the plot a little bit. But I really do love Battlestar Galactica. I especially like the politics they introduced and some really interesting intellectual questions. I had a cat who loved the theme song for Enterprise. I got faith of the heart. Yeah. He would hear it and start singing along. He would then get comfy and watch the show with us. It's been a long road. Yeah. Enterprise. I've been following you since the Dr. Disrespect days. Just wanted to say thanks for all the entertainment since. Thank you for following and for supporting the channel. It's been awesome. Slow but steady growth, says Dusky. That's been the mantra of the channel. Slow but steady on a percentage basis, kind of increasing. So it's kind of a linear track. I have absolutely no problem with where we're at. I'm thrilled. How could you not be thrilled about an audience the size of the Big House sitting with you and being willing to subscribe to your stuff and chatting with you about stuff that is of interest? And so I will never, ever, ever look that in the mouth because it is awesome. Strive says, I joined your channel at about 10,000 subs. The Susie Lou videos. Yes, you can't copyright your face. Important stuff. A lot of people were upset about Susie Lou at the time, so we covered that in videos. In Rhode Island, we have 10 credit hours required with 2 in ethics-specific ones. I agree with Rob. Active practice makes you stay up to date. I've resolved to taking interesting ones outside of my practice area. Yeah, just generalized learning. Orville, much better than it has any right to be. I quite like the Orville a lot. Oh, just saw this. YouTube is lousy for notices. They are. I actually have to get like the text notification that Emily uses. I think a lot of people like that. So if you want to sign up for that, we'll probably be putting that into place. There's like a list of 600 things. It's like having a house. Having a YouTube channel is like, all right, we've got 600 things we could do. We're still working on number 3. And that's only getting done because co-counsel is doing it. Everything else that I do falls by the wayside for the other 6,000 things that I'm doing. New spin question. Talking Twitter, Musk firing execs for cause, no golden parachute, potential mass firings before November 1st to avoid stock option bonuses. Thoughts? I think you have to take some of these rumors coming out of these various meetings with a grain of salt. I think it's clear that there's a leaky ship there and that employees are leaking places that they view as friendly. I have no idea what this actually looks like in the future. I thought a for-cause termination for management was odd. That is not what I would have expected. Generally, you try to make the transition smooth. Elon Musk is not about that. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. If I had, $40, $50 million of stock on the line, I'd probably sue because you can justify your legal fees on that, but we'll see. Yeah, that open letter from Twitter employees with all their demands, not a good luck. We talked about that. It was, if your goal was to assuage Elon Musk or otherwise convince him of something, that was the exact wrong way to do it. And I'm scrolling, looking for the word question. Question is the magic word. Oh my gosh, I love the original Battlestar Galactica from the 70s. Turning Starbuck into a woman was a deal breaker for me. She's so great. I was so cranky about that, but I might give it a go. I understand. I remember having those conversations back in the day about whether that was okay. Female Starbuck is aces. Aces. So go check it out. She is very good at being Starbuck, in my opinion. Getting from there to here. You're just going to put lines from Faith of the Heart in here for Enterprise. Yeah, that's one that is stuck in my head. So good job, Star Trek. Debbie says, I mean, cursing a lot and then not cursing when you're serious sometimes has the same effect. Honestly, when I'm mentoring lawyers or whomever, one of the things I say is you have to be yourself. If you try to copy me or you try to copy Bob or Mary or David or Mike or whomever, you're going to do it worse. You're going to be a discount version of that lawyer. Now, you can synthesize. You could take aspects of what everybody's doing. You can always be learning. But at your core, you have to do what makes sense to you. And if that's swearing like a sailor in kind of a friendly, backslapping manner, and then saying, all right, let's get down to brass tacks, and like treating it very seriously, and that works for you, who am I to tell you you're wrong? But you got to figure out what's going to be the best way of doing things that keeps you, because cheap copies are always going to be that, cheap copies. As an ex-Navy computer person, I respectfully disagree with that take on cursing. It's fair. Hey, like I said, you can only do what you can do. That's why this is a family-friendly space. It's what I prefer. On YouTube, it's how I prefer to operate, but different people are going to be different things. And you can, first of all, find a whole bunch of places on YouTube. If you're missing cursing in your life, you can go find it. I promise you. On this platform and others. But that's the way I'm always going to operate on these things. What else do we have here? Oh, we have Snoopykins with a big super chat. Thank you, Snoopykins. That's very nice. You question, seems I missed this twice. I can assure you I did not miss it intentionally to get you to super chat. If I missed it, I'm very sorry, Snoopykins. I know we're all a bit biased, but do you think that Nate's lawsuit will make it to court? Does he stand a chance? Is Boozy shooting himself in the foot with his poll? All right, so I have scanned the lawsuit. I have followed the tweets. I think Boozy's polls, like many of Boozy's outward public communications, are silly in the context of a lawsuit and not helpful and could potentially harm him. Defamation is very hard. I'm going to start with where I started with Depp v. Heard, right? Defamation as a case is very, very hard. And Nate is arguably a public figure of a limited purpose, perhaps, but this purpose being LawTube and YouTube commentary, and that's what he's being attacked on. And so I think it's going to be tricky. Do I think it makes it to court? Generally speaking, I would tell you no, because almost everything gets settled. In a case like this one, though, it's almost seemingly based more on emotion is wrong, but passion. Like, I don't know if Boozy's collectible, for instance. Like, even if you won a case against him, I don't know that you can win money. So unless you're going to be Johnny Depp and say, I'm just willing to spend this money to get things across the finish line, and maybe that's another GoFundMe or what have you, and if people are behind it, great. You're going to settle that most of the time. Now, Boozy is a very emotional actor. Nate, I think justifiably in certain respects, is emotional on the things that he's been called by Boozy. And so that's the kind of ingredient set that can get you into court. When you have that level of passion, that level of emotion, it's the kind of thing where you can find yourself in a courtroom. But in reading the statements, in reading what was said, I think some of the closest stuff is like the "you're not a real lawyer" stuff. And I still find it tricky in terms of defamation. We always, as an American society, want to be very careful with defamation because it goes directly against the First Amendment rights for freedom of speech, right? Obviously, defamation isn't included in that protection, but setting that line is so important to the legal practice. And I think it's a tricky thing. I think the lawsuit is well written. I think it is as strong as you can put those set of facts against another party. And I don't know who or how Boozy is represented. But I would not be calling it a slam dunk, and I wouldn't call it an instant win, as strong as I think it is written. So I'm sorry for that. Certainly, I think Boozy is a bad actor, and I think he's a troll on the internet. Is that illegal? I have more questions about that. Sorry. Equality. It's equality. What a name. People love it when I curse because I don't look like someone who does. Kind of a fun surprise. It is amusing, right? One of my favorite things is my assistant was an older lady for a long period of time in my career, in her late 60s. Looked like the sweetest grandma you'd ever seen. Looked like she should be crocheting behind the desk. And just occasionally outside my office, I can't even... You'll have to use your imaginations. But take a stand-up comedy routine that otherwise gets a warning on Netflix or HBO, and then apply that to the phone call that she's having with whomever, a service process person, a regulator, an outside agency. Sweetest person says, oh, Rick, I'm going down to the market. Can I get you a salad? And then just an absolute cannonade of the worst words. George Carlin would have blushed on the phone call. And I would come out and be like, it's always amusing. It is always funny when you do that. And it is. Thank you for the super chat equality. Katie Cotton, question, have you not looked at my YouTube avatar? Oh, my goodness. Look at that. I am shamelessly pandering before I change it to the other side of my cast. Paint pen tattoo there too. What? That is awesome. That's virtual legality at the top, lawyers and dragons at the bottom. Thank you so much, Katie Cotton. That makes me feel good. I'm sorry you're in a cast, of course, but that is very, very cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's sweet. I apologize for not seeing it earlier. That is awesome. Robbie says, I really like Katie Sackhoff. That's our Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica. In Another Life, I have to admit I really didn't like that show, but I'm glad you're enjoying it. I had that reaction to one of my friends when I watched the stream. They never swore over text, and I told them so, and they were like, wait, really? I think some of the funniest stuff is I have gotten the opportunity to talk to some of my favorite content creators that sometimes do family-friendly stuff, and just getting on the phone and just totally like locker room swears. It's like, oh, wow, okay, cool. Strive says, I'm a fan of VTubers because they look innocent, but they're always degenerate. That dichotomy between cuteness and not cuteness is often very, very funny and amusing to watch. I'm not gonna lie about that. Just caught up with Hangouts and headlines. This time change is messing up with my head. Facepalm emoji. As I understand it, when we fall back here in America, then we'll be back on the same time that you're used to. So we have a week of separation here where I'm at a different time than you are expecting. So sorry about that. Question, says Sharon, so much is talked about with record label and artist contracts. Do you ever review those? I love me some music, but I don't like artists getting messed over. So you probably hear me say, I've done a couple of videos on kind of the music copyright side of things, that copyright in music is one of the most complicated areas of law that exists. That you're talking about multiple licenses, multiple licensors, often multiple licensees. And I know enough to be dangerous very often on that topic. So in terms of clientele, if you were to sit across the desk from me and say, hey, can you review this music situation? I would send you to a specialist. But in terms of the commentary we can have on this channel and talk about and hopefully educate a little bit, we do that from time to time. But no, I'm not generally handling music contracts outside of like contributions to an audiovisual work, like a video game, independent contractor kind of thing. And most of those take an umbrella form, right? It's like, you assign us like everything you possibly have, and we'll use our umbrella terminology, and we'll probably still get it checked by a music specialist because music is just that weird. Question, can the employees or employees get in trouble for leaking this info? Absolutely. They're violating their fiduciary obligations of trust and trade secrets for their employer. So yes, I suspect one of the things that Inside Twitter is doing is trying to plug up these leaks, trying to make sure that they can understand where they're coming from, potentially adding identification marks to anything that's spoken about in these meetings, because yeah, it's leaky. There's a lot of employees that either feel they're going to be fired or just don't like new management, and they are leaking to everybody. And that's why you're seeing all of this news the past weekend. But if they find them and they're not valuable enough for the endeavor, then they can fire him 100%. Let's see here. Hoeg Law, Mrs. Hoeg Law. I know the text thing costs money. Yep. A lot of these things cost money. That's okay. Happy to do it. Patreon's notification system is good, and you can follow anyone there without having to become an actual patron. Okay. Good to know. The problem is YouTube should work, but it's just kind of random. And that's no fun. That's no fun. Talked to EDB before the tech stuff. She's had several problems with them. I'm constantly talking to EDB. She is wonderfully generous with her advice on all sorts of things. So yes, I will talk to Emily about that. But definitely, if you've got better ideas, we're looking to make sure that notifications make it out there a little bit more, because we do so many of these streams now, including this kind of double dip today. But speaking of that double dip today, it's just about the hour mark, which is what we do for question time. One last question. Mighty Muffin says, hey, speaking of daylight savings, hasn't Congress been talking about getting rid of it? They have. I don't think that'll ever go anyplace because Congress just doesn't do things very generally except kind of make huge omnibus bills. But that's another talk. That's bipartisan, by the way. It's just what they do. Yeah. All right. Everybody, thank you so much for a wonderful question time in October here. Thank you for helping me make sure it got done in October. I apologize to the Utreon folks, to the Patreon folks, for only giving you such a short period of time to actually get a question in. Flag me down if you're unhappy with that and ask me a question in different contexts. I will make sure it gets answered. For everybody else, please do consider supporting the channel. We really appreciate it. It's such fantastic ability for us to not have to rely on the mercurialness of YouTube quite as much. That Utreon does get virtually everything over to us rather than stopping at the platform. Patreon a little bit less so, but I know that a lot of folks are used to that platform. Check it out. And as always, if none of those interest you, like the channel on the way out, subscribe, leave a comment, engage with YouTube. YouTube loves to see you engaging, likes to know that we're not just some kind of weird con man out there not giving you content, and the likes let YouTube know that that is in fact happening. Thank you everybody for joining us today. If I get up to it, I have a few things to do in kind of the practice of law field. If I get up to it, there might well be a virtual legality about Mr. Musk and all sorts of things happening at Twitter this weekend. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow for Hangouts and Headlines, where we'll be talking about something that I haven't yet decided. Thanks again, everybody, for question time, and I will see you very, very soon.